Welcome, everyone. Um, Good morning. We are so pleased to have Casey back. For those of you who don't know, Casey is an expert in mental health and integrative nutrition. And through her coaching nonprofit, Human Better, she teaches in high schools across the country, helping teens boost their mental wellness, development, and working with educators to empower them to work with teens. Casey also wrote a regular column for the Washington Post on nutrition. And Casey, we are so thrilled
Mhm.
to have you back.
So
And
glad to
today,
be here. Mhm.
and today we're going to talk about a topic that I think is incredibly underappreciated, and that is helping siblings when one of their siblings is struggling. And so often, all the heat and light and energy and effort and attention kind of goes to that child who is struggling, and the others just kind of, you check in every few months, say, "How are you doing? Good, okay, great," and they can be kind of ignored or just not get the attention they may need. Um, so we thought it'd be great to talk about how we can better support siblings.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to talk about it. And yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things I would start with. You know, there are kind of a handful of things that kids that very typically when a child is struggling and then there are siblings, um, everybody's going to handle it differently, right? Because family situations are different, siblings are different ages, personalities, they have different coping skills. But there are certain things that are pretty true and happen pretty consistently when there is a sibling struggling. And so I thought I could go through some of the things that typically happen, and we can kind of talk about some of the things that you can do to support your child in those circumstances, and then just other things that you can do or that they can do to help. So first, and I'd love if you guys want to chime in at any point with any of your experiences, just jump in. But the first thing I'd say is that witnessing a brother or sister in trouble or behaving aggressively, which happens a lot, can just be really scary. And it often scares us as parents when we see our kids out of control or dysregulated or whatnot. And so we want to normalize that it is okay for our kids to feel scared, right? Because they should have appropriate responses to whatever is happening around them. So we want to make sure that it is safe for them to come to us. It feels safe for them to always come to us or to another trusted adult to share these feelings. We don't want them to feel like, oh, there's something wrong with them that they feel scared around by the situation or by what's happening. So that's the first thing I would say. The second that, we've talked about is that, and Jeff, you just mentioned, is that parents have to focus a lot of attention to a child who's in crisis. There is no way around that. The bulk of the time, the bulk of the energy, the bulk of the attention has to go to the child who is in crisis. And so siblings very often feel forgotten or ignored. And I've actually heard kids say, like, I'm not loved as much. Like, it's clear I'm not loved as much. I'm clearly not as important, right? Because the sibling has been getting all of the attention. And one of the things that I hear and that is can be pretty common is for a parent to say, no, 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 like that's not right. I love you that much. I love you just as much. And it is okay to say that, but it's also important to say, I understand why you feel that way because I'm not spending as much time with you. So we don't want to shut down that feeling. We want to acknowledge that it is true they are not getting as much attention, and that it is true that they might feel that way, and that we want to do our best job to make sure that we can rectify that. So we don't want to shut down their feelings. We want to acknowledge that those are real. It's not that we need to apologize because, like I said, we have to spend time with the child who's in crisis. But we do want to talk to them about what it is that we can do that will help them feel more loved, help them feel more important. Is it one-on-one time? Maybe one parent goes away for that with them for a night. Like, what can we do? 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, walk the dog around the block. Like, what can we do to make them feel like they're getting what they need?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of another one. The third thing I'd say that, and I actually have a story about this one, but kids sometimes mimic the negative behaviors of their brother or sister, especially if they're younger and they're not really actually understanding where all that negative behavior is coming from. So they think that they're going to get the same amount of attention, right, from their parents if they start mimicking that same behavior. And my younger son actually once did this. I found him in his room and he was just slamming his head against the wall. And it's funny now, but my older son had had 2 concussions. He had missed
Mm.
a month of school both times. He had gotten a lot of attention, a lot of doctor's appointments and just our attention. And this was when they were young. But I literally found my younger son just smashing his head against the wall because he thought if he got a concussion too, he could get that attention, right? And all of those other advantages of missing school and all of those things you know so that's just a small example, but have you guys ever witnessed one of your siblings kind of repeating any of the behavior? Is that something that ever happened?
I would say, at least in my experience, it was more the opposite. And I wanted to pick up on a couple things you mentioned. You talked about it's understandable that the parents are going to focus on the kid who's in crisis. I think part of the challenge often is the crisis goes on for a really long time. It's not 6 weeks. It might be a course of years.
Yes.
And so, at least in my case, I think what I saw the siblings doing was they were like, I'm just going to put my head down. I'm going to be a good doobie. I'm good. Don't worry about me. And so you're kind of like, okay, they're good. I'm not going to worry about her or him. And then you find out 4 years later, oh, you know what? She's not good. She's really
Mhm.
struggling with, internalizing everything. So that's at least been my experience. Jeff, I don't know about you.
Yeah, we had a similar experience, um, where there was periods, where my one who was struggling was, in a more acute stage. So there were a lot, and my other one was just kind of, rolling along and holding together. But what happened over time is, for the one who was struggling, we were constantly, kind of dealing with crises, and we'd have to change our schedule and go deal with a situation or go pick them up from somewhere or take them somewhere or whatever, on almost kind of like an emergency basis. And what happened is, that obviously overrode the schedule of the other one. And
Mhm.
it didn't really manifest until at some point there was just almost like a blow up. Like, I always have to be late, and it's always because we're dealing with, my brother and blah, blah, blah. And it just came out in that way where it was the frustration of just finally cumulatively life being impinged by, their sibling schedule, which just got overwhelming at one point. And that's that like blow up finally let me, see, oh my gosh, we really need to take a step back here and reevaluate how we're supporting this.
Yeah, those are both such good examples, and I'd love to touch on both of the things. So Catherine, what you said, one of the other things I was going to bring up is the kind of perfection people pleaser that a sibling can become because they are so afraid of causing any more angst or stress in the house. And so they think that they need to be perfect, so that they can help hold it together. So, they grow up really fast. They start taking on responsibilities in the house that they might not otherwise. They think they have to get straight A's. They always have to do the right thing. If they have any negative feelings, they can't share them with you because you just can't handle it. And that's the other child's role.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous path for them to be on. Also, like, we all know nobody is perfect, and we don't want these children to ever think they have to be. And so, and this goes along, Jeff, with what you said. One of the things I suggest is that parents check in with that other child very regularly because things change, and so they might be fine. And then 3 weeks, 2 weeks later, they actually might not because something else has happened at school that's put them over the edge, and so, and same thing, like maybe that they weren't late a lot. And then in a 2 week period, they were super late a lot and their schedule got tossed around and they're really angry and they weren't angry 2 weeks ago. So it really is about constantly checking in with them to figure out what they need in that moment, at that moment of time, because it's so much is changing for them too. I mean, we all know that middle schoolers or high schoolers, any kind of kids or teens, tweens, like so much changes in their life on an average day, whether a friend's nice to them, a teacher was in a bad mood, they got a bad grade, they didn't play well on their sports team, they didn't get the part. Like, talk about average things happening. That's just happening to a typical child. And so if all of that is changing and then there's a lot happening in their house, you just want to be constantly checking in with them. And you don't need to be like, are you okay? Like, it doesn't, it's
Be
just
annoying.
annoying, right? And like as if you're waiting for a shoe to drop, because that's one thing we want to be careful of, that we're not always sort of waiting for their shoe to drop. But just to say, like, hey, is there anything that you need from me right now? I know I'm still giving a lot of attention to your older sibling. Is there anything you need? Is there anything that's driving you crazy? Anything I'm not doing well that you want to tell me about? I might not be able to fix it, but I'd really like to try. That kind of just so they're feeling like they're getting, that's going to make them feel like they're important. We talked about this before, them not feeling loved or as important.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you can check in and show them that what their needs are important, even if you can't meet all of them, because you just might not be able to. But if
Yeah.
you know that their biggest problem at that moment, or the thing that they're most frustrated about, is that they don't have rides and they're late, maybe that's something you can figure out.
Right.
No. So you want to ask them, and you really want to know what's bothering them, because we often project what we think is hard, and every
Mhm.
kid is different. And so we really want to hear from them, like, what is it that you need from me and from our family right now?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I know one thing I used to do because a girlfriend advised me to do this and it was great was just get in bed with my daughter at night when she was going to bed and just lay there with her. And then we could talk without directly looking at each other. And it wasn't so much like, are you okay? What's going on? But I wanted to ask you also about parents regulating their emotions around it. And I've thought a lot about what you said in one of the recordings we did over the summer about the parent sort of being the tree with the roots in the ground. And as soon as you said that, I thought, I was like, God, I really failed in that. And I think it's
Yeah.
because, you know, so often my son would go into some or cause some kind of a crisis and I wear my emotions on my sleeve. And so I would be a puddle of tears or something. And my daughter, who was home, would see that. And of course, it would freak her out. And so I guess I would love any advice you have around those moments when you still have your roots in the ground, but you're swaying a little more than you should, or you're letting them see how rattled you are by what's going on.
Yeah. So I have two answers for that. One is you want to bring your children in depending on their age, so age appropriately on what's happening on
Yeah.
the siblings in, because you don't want them to feel like they're put over here and you and the rest of the family are dealing with this huge thing that's disrupting the whole family and you're not actually telling them what's going on. And
Mm.
so on some level, you want to bring them in age appropriately so that they feel like they understand what's happening. The kids are going to make up so much information on their own if they don't hear it. So partially is that if they know what's coming on, what's going on, and they come in and you're crying, like at least that they have context for it and it will make sense. And so it's
Yeah,
probably a lot less scary than if they just saw you crying and they knew
for
something was
sure.
happening, but they didn't know what it was.
Yes,
So
yes.
there's that. And then the second thing I would say is that with our own self-regulation, which is really hard, when we're all of our emotions, we're at our wits' end, right? Like we are completely out of our window of tolerance of what we can handle. Like we can't handle one more thing. One
Yeah.
thing I would say is that the more you can acknowledge where you are on a certain day or in a certain moment before you react. So let's say
Mhm.
you had no sleep and your son had just caused a true big episode stressor, and your other kids are about to get home from school. Just you even saying to yourself, like, okay, I'm at capacity. Like I got
Mhm.
no sleep. This has been a really hard day. I'm at capacity. The best thing I could possibly do is to engage as little as possible in anything stressful. Like don't pick a fight with them. Don't,
Yes,
have you done your homework? Like that. This is not the
right.
time to make them do their chores or whatever it is, right? Like this is not the time to get into anything heavy because you probably can't handle it as well. And if they do something that triggers you, before you respond, the more you can say, like, today's not my best day. I'm at my window of tolerance. I'm not sure I'm going to handle this well. And just understand your own regulation. You're less likely to just react unintentionally and unconsciously. So it's really just understanding ourselves and when we're at our own capacity, because we are a lot when we are working,
Yeah,
caring for a
we're
struggling
still
child.
human.
Yeah.
Um, and I wanted to ask specifically about sibling guilt, at least for those of us who have made the decision to send the child in crisis away to
Mhm.
treatment program. I have heard a lot of guilt expressed by the siblings who are at home, like, understand why he's away, but I feel guilty that we're on vacation and he's not with us. Do you have advice
Yes.
about how to help them navigate that?
Yeah, it's actually a really big thing. These kids feel really guilty that, that either they're getting a better life and that they're not struggling and that things are easier for them, or they even feel guilty. I hear a lot that they want a break from their sibling and they feel bad that they just want to get out of the house and they don't want to be with that sibling. But what we want to normalize is that in terms of wanting a break or just getting away and not always being together, that's a normal relationship. Nobody should spend all their time together, right? Like we need a break from our spouses, our children, our best friends, our closest coworkers. Like everybody needs a break sometimes to kind of get a little breath of air, some, deep breaths, and then come back to the relationship, even if it's in a time of goodness, right? And so it is okay to sometimes need that break. In terms of the guilt of the child being sent away, so what they need to understand, so guilt is often that they have a negative feeling to something that they've done or something that's happened, right? They don't feel good about something that's happened, and they have to understand that none of this was in their control. So they don't have anything to feel guilty for because their siblings' behavior or addiction or struggles had nothing to do with them. The choice to send them away was not their choice. This was the parent's choice. And so there is nothing in this that they had control over, and so this is not their thing to necessarily feel guilty for. I mean, they may really feel bad
Yeah.
that they're down in Mexico on a vacation and feel like, wow, I wish my sibling was here, or whatever it might be. But they didn't cause any of this, right? And none of this was their choice. So this is not something that they can attach themselves to. If I had done this differently, this wouldn't be where we are.
That's awesome. And I want to actually switch tacks a little bit because we did a recording yesterday with a therapist from a residential treatment program, and we were talking about kids coming home for the holidays. You know, before we know it, it'll be Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I would love your perspective specifically on the siblings who are home. So if your child in crisis has been away at wilderness, at residential treatment, whatever, they're coming home for Thanksgiving and Christmas or, Hanukkah, whatever. And we all know holidays are ripe with stress anyway, whether it's additional family members or whoever's going to be around. Plus, it's stressful for the child coming home and then thinking about the siblings and how do they feel about all that. So I'd love
Yeah.
your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, those are great, great questions. There are a couple of things that I would say. First is before the sibling comes home, you want to make sure that the one who is at home has a support system, because their whole world is going to get bumpy when that child comes home. Everything's going to change. As you just said, holidays are hard anyway, but like the routines are going to change, the energy, the noise, the interactions, the dynamics. And so you want to make sure that there are a couple of things. There's a support system for that other child, because again, a lot's going to be focused on the one who's coming home. So do they have other adults who they can be talking to? Do they have a therapist? Do they have an aunt and uncle, a grandparent, a coach? Is there anybody you can kind of build this support network for them, so that is still there outside of that family when that child comes home, that they can go talk to? So I think that's one important thing, so that they have someone to go to. I think I would also ask the child, hey, what is it that I can do with you, that we as your parents can do with you when things get hard? Or do you want to make sure we have one-on-one time together? Do we need to walk the dog together? Do we need a code word when things are really hard and you're having feelings? Because sometimes for a child to say, like, I can't handle this, or my sibling's driving me crazy, or I don't want to be here, that can be a really hard thing. Talk about the guilt, like to say out loud. But maybe they just need a code word that's like baseball or something. And that
I
to
need a
you
break.
means I need a break, or I need some attention,
Yeah.
So something like that. I also think allowing them like to talk about what their feelings are about that child coming home before the child comes, and then allowing them during and after to talk about the feelings for real, so they can get out the fact that this is hard. I didn't actually like when they were home, but I also liked when they were home, and I'm really confused. Right. So just making sure that it is okay for them to say anything about what the situation is, and that you, again, will be that tree. You won't mirror them, all the stuff we talked about last time. Like it is okay for them to say whatever they feel, and they can dump those hot potatoes on you and you can handle them. I think the other thing that I would just say is I would remind them, and this is not in a way of, oh my gosh, the fact that you have a struggling sibling is so good for you, like lucky you. It's not that. But I would
Yeah.
remind them that they really are developing some amazing skills. And not like I said in this fake way, but
Right.
reminding them, hey, I've really noticed that your communication skills have gotten better because you've had to advocate for yourself. So when your sibling is home, can you use those communication skills and can you tell me what you need? You know, or I've really noticed how resilient you are. You've been through some really hard things, as is our family. And I know we're going to get through this vacation too together because we've already built like some of those things just to remind them that they have really, really strong skills, some of which they've gained because of the sibling.
No, I think that's so great. And even just as you've been saying all along, just acknowledging their feelings, validating them, because I do think in the moment as a parent, it's so easy to get caught up in the child in crisis that you kind of, especially if the other kids are not causing any trouble, you kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
forget not to just treat them like, well, if everything's normal, how was school? How was your test? And just acknowledging this is hard seems
Yeah.
really powerful and validating for them.
Yeah, it is. And the other thing I'd say about those, like the siblings, the non-struggling child, is help them figure out what helps them. Like what fuels their body battery, that we've talked about. So
Yeah.
if during that break, is it that they go for a run? Is it like do they need to go see their friends? What are the
Mm.
things that actually keep them feeling strong? And so you can use the tree analogy, but like what are the things that make you feel like you can handle all the chaos that's around you and help them start to develop that understanding of themselves because it is going to be hard,
Yeah.
when the dynamics change.
Yeah, one of the things that we did with the sibling was um after he sort of had that blow up at one point and said, "Hey, I'm here." I just try to be really conscious of regularly scheduling going and doing some activity that he loved together, that we loved together. Like, for us, it was going surfing or fishing or hiking or whatever. But
Mhm.
just every, as much as you can. Sometimes it might be weekly, sometimes it might be monthly. But just going and doing something like for us, it was nice that it was kind of quiet and peaceful. And we could sort of check in, in a that wasn't just, quickly, drive to school or sitting at home in the same old context, but getting outside and doing an activity that we, both shared a love of. That really seemed to be incredibly powerful. And it just kind of creates a naturally safe context to check in and see how they're doing.
Yeah, that's a great, I mean, especially getting outside and something that's just the two of you.
Yeah.
Such a good idea. And the more you commit to those things, like if you say to your kid, hey, we are going to surf once a month. I mean,
Mhm.
even if it can't be more than that, once a month, whatever it is, I'm going to do this with you. Let's do this. I mean, it just makes them feel like you've committed to them. And if you actually follow through, that says so much to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other thing that I would just say about the siblings who are home is that the more they can understand when they can come to the situation with curiosity, and this goes for all of us. And when I coach people, I'm constantly saying, okay, let's look at this situation as if we're a curious bystander instead of judging and being upset by what's happening. And this is just so it's an important thing to use all the time. But if they can look at, let's say their sibling embarrasses them by an outburst or what they're doing or their attitude or whatever. If they can say, okay, this is really embarrassing. What is come to with curiosity of like, where did my sibling come from? Why is my sibling behaving this way? What can I understand about this situation? They're going to come more in their heart instead of in their head of like, why is this happening?
Yeah.
And so the more they can keep trying to be curious about their sibling, they're going to stay more connected and loving versus getting farther and farther away because they're just resisting this other person that's causing all this stress. And so just helping them, and you can model that as a parent by doing it yourself. Like, gosh, I'm really curious. Why did he just behave that way?
Mhm.
And just kind of talking it through and you starting to understand, why is this child behaving this way? What is contributing to the situation. But that little reframing can sometimes just get us a little bit softer and in our hearts a little more, which can help with the relationship.
Yeah, that's a great lens, because I do think it is often so much transition if one child has been sent away. And I know certainly in our family, one of the things that I think was hard for all of us was when we finally did send him away, there was a sense of actually of relief in the house. All of a sudden, the maelstrom was quiet and life got back to a little bit more of a normal rhythm. And, I think we all felt a little bit guilty about feeling that way. And then when they come home, it's all sort of discombobulated again, and then they go back. And so there is a lot of moving parts, and that's all also aggravated during holidays and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, and that guilt is real because there is a relief.
Mhm.
You have a break for the first time that you may not have had a break in a long time. And so those feelings are real. I also think depending on the age and the relationship, if the sibling can ask the one who's coming home, hey, how can I support you? How can I make this easier for you?
Yeah.
What are things that we can do together? It just will also help if both of them are speaking their truth. Like this one sibling is saying, hey, I'd love to go throw a baseball with you. And the other
Mhm.
one saying, whatever, the more they can be communicating about actually their needs, just like we want the sibling to say, hey, mom and dad, this is what I need from you. The more we
Mhm.
can get them actually saying what they need, the better the whole situation will be.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what you were talking about earlier, is that them feeling like all of this stuff is not my choice, but allowing them to talk to each other, to come up with a plan together, gives both of them some agency in how is this visit going to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wonder if you have any thoughts, Casey, on like when a child's coming home from a program or something, maybe a long-term absence. Um, I know in our case, like a younger one felt like I just don't trust him anymore, and I resent all this chaos. And you know,
Yeah.
how can he felt really guilty about kind of having an anger and a
Anger. Yeah,
distrust.
that's a
And in
great
fact,
point.
he even said at one point, like, I hate when we have calm periods because I know something's coming. Like,
Mhm.
when it's in the chaos, like I just know it's chaos and I can you kind of deal with that. But he got to a point where he hated a few days of calm because he knew a blow up was coming. Um, and we had to kind of work through after all the programs and everything was sort of turning around, like, I still just don't trust him. And how to approach that to kind of rebuild that relationship.
Such a good question. There's actually a lot there. I'm going to focus on one thing first, and if I can remember the rest, I'll go back because they were really good questions. The rebuilding of a relationship is, I would start by, and a therapist will do a much better job than I could at this, but the summary would be, what are the beliefs that sibling has about the relationship with their struggling sibling? So I'm just going to use I don't trust him. Right. So
Mhm.
if they truly believe that their sibling is not trustworthy, they are going to be putting on a pair of glasses that look for everything. They're going to be looking through the lens of all the ways that they can't trust that sibling. And so we need to start flipping that belief and collecting evidence for another truth, right? Because there are many truths out there. It may be true that in some circumstances that sibling is still not trustworthy. And it's probably true that there were many times leading up to that they weren't. But now let's see what's true now. And so it's trying to take off the belief glasses of like, this kid is not trustworthy, and let's collect evidence for anything else we can find. And so having that curious open mind of, okay, and you can do this with your kid, let's make a list on our phone of every time he actually follows through, right? I mean, you don't want to be doing this secretly, like you know,
Yeah.
but you can do it. Like, I believe we're going to find a lot. Let's go find it. Like, let's literally go find it. Hey, I noticed that he followed through here. I noticed that he followed through here. And just trying to help and not prove your other sibling wrong, but trying to
Mhm.
help him step into the fact that there are potentially other truths here. Because you're really rewiring a belief system, because he had every right to create that belief for a while, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a perfectly logical reaction, from their
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the things that we talked about was look, it's just something that's going to be earned back over time. And all you can do is like every day, just like lay down a good day.
Yeah.
And then lay down another one, and then another one. And before you know it, you're like, wait a minute, we actually have a good path here, and build it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
The other
Casey, or go
No,
ahead,
just
please.
one more thing, and then I promise we'll go because I know we're at time. The other thing I would say for the sibling is like, don't be afraid to write out the dream of the relationship that one wants. Like, get intentional. This is how I want to be with my brother who's coming back home. You cannot control how the big brother is going to be, but you can control how you are. So I want to make an effort 3 times a day to engage with him. I want to, ask him about like something every day. I want to stay patient when I want to start collecting evidence for the fact that he is trustworthy. Like, figure out, that sibling can figure out how they want to show up and what they want to contribute to the relationship, because that's really all they have. They can't control the other sibling, but they can control what they bring and what they want to bring.
So
Well,
helpful.
Casey, once again, I wish we had done this for me personally years ago, but so
Okay.
tremendous. I mean, I guess like my big takeaways are lots of communication,
Yeah.
checking in with that sibling, seeing what they need from you. I think a big one you said is, accentuating to them that they are not guilty. It's not their issues. Approaching it from a perspective of learning, curiosity, and then just steadily rebuilding those relationships between siblings. And I really like that, like kind of writing out your dream even. I think it's a really interesting. So thank you once again. Such
Casey, you're the
tremendous
best.
advice.
Thank you.
Really
Great to
appreciate it.
see you guys. Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.